have a special guest today. We have Earl on the podcast. He's a big wig around this town.
That's stretching it, bud.
Nah, he knows everyone. He's got how long do you got sober?
It'll be 3 years at middle of January.
Middle of January, so that's coming up quick here. He runs Elements that we promote every podcast. He sponsors a ton of guys, including myself. And it's awesome to have you on. Thanks for showing up, bro.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It should be fun.
How long were you using for?
Oh, in the opiate life, about 15 years total. I was the kind of guy that I started drinking and smoking weed right out of high school. Well, really in high school. I actually lost a baseball scholarship because I smoked a joint with my coach on the bus on the way home. So
Was that to college or where was that?
Yeah, that was a full ride for baseball into college.
Damn.
Yep.
Man, how could you weed?
I know, right? It was really shitty weed too. It wasn't even worth
it. How'd you even feel about that anyway? Like when you lost that scholarship, did you even care? Were you just
I didn't.
whatever?
I didn't at the time because the way I grew up was I was taught that if I was going to get anything in my life, I had to work and I had to earn it. I had no way to pay for school outside of a scholarship. So even if I got to school with a scholarship, I still had to eat, I still had to drink, I still had to chase ladies. So really it was just an idea. So I was actually kind of grateful, to be honest with you.
So when you realized that you lost your scholarship, like you just gave it all up and just said, I'm just going to do this full time?
Initially, I was, I'd accepted the fact that I was just going to go to work the rest of my life. And so I started dating. That's where I went mentally. And I started dating this girl, and she could actually drink more beer than I could at the time. So I was like, all right, I got me a running partner, you know?
Yeah.
You got something to work up to now.
Yeah.
Get to that level.
Well, and you never feel like I'm that bad if a girl can outdrink you. So,
No. And it was still fun. It wasn't a chore yet. You know, it wasn't a chore because it was still kegers in the woods and, mushrooms whenever you could find them. It was still fun.
Where'd you grow up at anyway?
Colorado, little town called Estes Park.
We all usually start off with beer and weed, and that's socially acceptable. But when did it actually take the turn to where you decided that I'm gonna actually start like trying opiates or anything? You just go straight into like full on heroin or?
No, I wasn't that cool. Basically, what I did was I quit drinking about 4 months after I turned 21 because I had a 6-month-old daughter and a wife at the time that was super pissed because I really struggled with hiding how much I drank, in front of her anymore because when she got pregnant, she just quit. She just quit. And my mindset was like, all right, more beers for me in the fridge. But it had got to that point to where my relationship with her was nil, and my 6-month-old daughter was, she really didn't know who I was. And so I quit drinking, and I started going to some 12-step meetings. And I actually stayed clean for 3 years to the day.
What stopped you from staying sober after 3 years to the day?
Well, I broke my back at work, and I went to the hospital, and obviously, they got me good and doped up, just like we like. And I remember sitting there in the hospital, finding out if they were going to do surgery or not, thinking that it's okay if I do drugs because I'm an alcoholic. That was my mindset. That was my justification. That was my excuse that drugs were okay. Even though growing up, my whole life is just littered with drug addicts.
Yeah.
But that justification that I'm only an alcoholic, so it's okay if I do drugs.
Yeah.
So I was pretty much bedridden for about 4 months with endless scripts of perks. So Percocets, which were my perks, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happened for me, too. We start off with the surgery. And at the time, I was going through a bad breakup with some girl that totally just shit on me and said, I wouldn't be anything. That I was just, all my dreams of trying to be something were an illusion. And, it was pointless for us to be together. And then I had this hernia repair. And then the whole time they were just handing me like, liquid Percocet, and I got hooked on it. And when I got hooked, I was so anxious. I remember having a panic attack, just straight up like, oh man, I'm in this. Oh shit. How am I? And then finally you realize that your life isn't very on track right then to begin with. So it's like, what else do I gotta really live for? And then perks start getting hard to find, and then of course heroin shows up.
On it went.
Yeah.
Went in down the dark road, huh?
Yeah.
The one rule that my wife had was that no booze with the pills, because I was doing months of pills, and buddies would always show up with a 6-pack or a 12-pack, and it was cool. I'd have a beer or whatever when she wasn't there. And she found a bunch of beer cans in the trash can, and she's like, "What are you doing drinking?" And it's like, "It's okay. It helps. Like,
it intensifies it.
Like it's better for me because the mixture is some chemical amazing experience that is supposed to happen."
Yeah.
And funny story was I hadn't taken a dump in like 9 days. Right, that's when I knew it started getting real. And
you had to think hard on that one too, huh?
I did.
When was the last time I?
It was because I was in such a euphoric place mentally that it was amazing. And so I hadn't taken a dump in 9 days, and my wife at the time, she worked for a pharmacy. So I call her up and I'm like, "Steph, got a big problem. You need to call an ambulance." And that's exactly what she did. She started laughing. She's like, "Well, what, did you trip and fall, or what's going on?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't taken a shit in 9 days, Steph." And I'm pretty sure like something really, really bad is happening here.
Yeah.
And so
the not knowing is the worst part. Like, what's going on?
Where is it going?
Yeah. Like, you think you're just gonna like implode on the inside? Like, I know I've had that problem before.
Yeah, it was just horrible, and she just thought it was so comical. So she had to leave work, and she came home, and I'm just postured on the bathroom floor, like honestly thinking I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And she's like, "I'm not calling an ambulance." She's like, "Get in the shower and dig that fucker out." Like, time to get after it.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Basically, her what she said was, "If you're gonna play, you're gonna have to pay."
Yeah.
And that statement stuck with me for my using for the next 15 years, because that's basically my story. Is I go into it with the mindset of knowing that I'm going to have to eventually pay if I want to play.
How many times have you relapsed, like from going good, bad, good, bad?
That's kind of a tough question to answer, because
of your long stints.
Long stints, I relapsed once on my 3-year birthday. Is when I broke my back. And then I used for several years. Then I got back into treatment, relapsed again on my second 3-year birthday, and then ran for a few years. And now at this point, I'm coming up on 3 years, like we discussed earlier.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, are you scared about that, or how are you feeling about it? I'm sure you're okay, like right now, but it's just that 3-year mark for some reason is a little bit special.
It's a little bit dicey.
Yeah.
It definitely is. I'd say this go around in recovery, I look at being sober through a different perspective, that the statement of one day at a time really speaks true to me, because honestly, I don't know if I'm going to get high tomorrow, but I do know that spiritually, mentally, physically, and emotionally, I've taken care of myself for today. I sought my treatment this morning with my higher power. I'm connecting with other people in recovery. And so I pretty much have my insurance done for today. Now tomorrow's a new day, because I have a fresh choice tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
All right. So what was your rock bottom? What would you say like that is? Like, you've probably had several of them, but what is like your rock bottom towards the end of each time you used? What did that look like for you?
My rock bottom, there's been several rock bottoms. Let's start with physical. My physical rock bottom, the worst was I had overdosed probably 4 or 5 years ago now. I picked up dope at 1 o'clock, and by 2 o'clock I was out cold. And my wife found me at 5 o'clock that evening, and when they took my temperature and my vitals, when she found me on the hotel floor, it was 89 degrees. and they called off CPR. They called off Narcan. They were 6 milligrams deep with the Narcan, and they just said, we're calling it. And she wouldn't let them. And so physically, that was my worst. I was down to about 150 pounds.
So wait, they went back there after the fact that she told them no, don't stop, and then you came back, or
this was on the motel floor. They said, no, we're done. He's done. We're gonna load him in the ambulance, take him to the hospital, and let the morgue do with him. And she's like, absolutely not. You're going into the ER when you're there. I'm riding in the ambulance with you. You can continue the Narcan shots all the way. And I guess I came to on the way there. And the first thing I remember is waking up in the ER and just shaking uncontrollably because I was so cold. And with being so cold and with that amount of Narcan in my system was hellish. Probably the worst experience that I've ever had. Like,
ouch.
And you know what? You know how much weight our words have in the ER when we wake up from an overdose?
Like nothing.
You
can't ask for anything, or they don't take you seriously. They don't really think of you as like an actual person. They just think of you as like, oh yeah, well, we'll deal with you.
Yeah, you're another number.
Yeah.
In there, and but physically that was probably my worst rock bottom. Physically was that one.
That's a lot of Narcan.
It was horrible. It was horrible. And then they kept continuing. I kept nodding out while I was in the bed.
You must have had like pens sticking out your legs and your arms.
It was the worst thing ever. And I kept nodding out, and so they kept giving me another milligram to keep me going. And I was just getting so frustrated and so pissed off because I was on a pretty nasty run, and I hadn't slept for days and days. And I'm like, look, doctor, I just really needed some sleep. And he's like, yeah, but your heart rate goes down to below 40 beats per minute every time you try and fall asleep. And so it was hard. It was the worst burn ever, having Narcan while you're awake. I would scream, like torture, complete torture.
What does it do? Just like dumps all the opiates in your system, so you're just instantly like going through it, or
it pretty much neutralizes it, maybe more than dumps it, but it neutralizes the opiate in your system. So yeah, it's immediate withdrawal, and the way that the opiate molecule bonds to your nervous system is in a way that when they put the Narcan in there, it's like literally just tearing them off the ends of your nerves is what it feels like.
Yeah, I know people that woke up pissed because they got hit with the Narcan. Cause,
absolutely.
It's like, why did you, fuck up my high right now?
I mean, that's why I started stashing dope, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because over the past 15 years, I ended up with, I'm not proud of this number by any means, but 7 overdoses in 15 years. And after, I think, the third one, I would always have something stashed, because when you're walking out of that ER and you need a fix, like, just knowing that it's there is enough to, like...
By stash. Would you elaborate?
Okay, so a stash of product is pretty much like a treasure box of safety, of comfort,
yes,
of emotional escape, of cancellation of shame and guilt created by the previous circumstance.
Yeah.
So that's what I would call a stash, is like, you can go out in the creek and you can find a gold nugget and it's very valuable, right?
Yeah.
To the using heroin addict, having a gram of product stashed, just all knowing that that's basically your life raft.
I thought you meant like on you at all times.
No.
Like
The cops were always
wallet.
pretty good. No wallet.
Oh, no.
No,
Okay,
no,
I knew it.
Only had to go that route once down in Tucson.
Do you look back at this like thinking you're crazy now, knowing that you have pretty much almost died this many times, and to have that safety net to know that you could just die again with the same exact thing? Does that make you think a little bit?
It does. What it does is it instills the insanity that we talk about a lot of the times.
Yeah,
because
for
It's
sure.
just fucking crazy, man.
running and gunning at that strength, you're so focused on the score, the use, the money, the this, the that, me personally, I don't even think about consequences. When I'm focused on going to pick up or getting through my day with my fix, that's what matters most.
Yeah.
And it's sad to say, but that's but that's the weight that it carried with me.
So your mental state of like your worst, you went over your physical, right?
Yeah, physical. That was my physical. Mental. Mental was way worse, I'd say.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
my
I don't
work-
even know what
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, when people say that when you're detoxing, you actually haven't tried to get sober before, they're like, oh, the mental part's worse, and you're just sitting there like shaking and puking. You're like, there's no way that this can be any worse. Like, you dumb, like, but so it really is though, and you have to figure that out and get it worked out. But it's definitely an uphill battle with your emotional. How'd you deal with it?
Dealing with it, usually detox meds are usually pretty good. There's these things called KPs that I would always get administered. Klonopin is what they're called. Those would always help with getting through the detoxes. And then
It's just an upper.
it's just basic.
No, it's a downer. It's like a Xanax.
It's like a miniature Xanax.
It's like a long-term lighter
I was
diet
thinking a
Xanax.
clonazepam or whatever.
Clonazepam, that's still that's even weaker than Klonopin
Oh, is it?
in that. I mean, I could be wrong, but from what I remember, that's
Yeah.
those were the good ones that they give you in detox. And then always going the Subutex or Suboxone route is.
Suboxone's like a cure for heroin, though. If you take it, it's just you're cured no matter what,
It
right?
is- yeah, it is. It's like. Yeah, that's. Oh, I would
It's
not
just a
recommend that.
cheaper way out.
No,
the
no,
only way
it's-
out is the hard way out.
It's the government saying we don't want you to take your drugs. We want you to take our drugs. So if you're gonna be addicted to opiates, here's the cure for you.
Yeah, that
Works every time.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
And it does work. It definitely does work. It keeps you out of the skeezies of the opiate detox, but you're still chemically addicted.
Yeah, I know when I was on heroin for a while, it was so hard every day, like you said, to get up, figure out how I was going to get those drugs, actually going out and getting them, and that struggle was so hard. But when I started taking Suboxone myself, like, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel the opiates even handling it. So I thought, like, oh, I just took this and then now everything's getting fixed in my head like a complete dumbass.
Yeah.
But
The naiveness is crazy, right?
yeah, and then I went to detox to get it out of my system. I'm like, oh, this can't be anywhere as bad as it was to get off heroin. And I can only compare it to being at like the bottom of like a 200-degree jacuzzi and your head feeling like it's gonna get crushed in, and then getting ran over by a Mack truck that's on fire. It's just, you just feel absolutely like you have nothing in your soul. And I was like that for 8 days straight in agony.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyone that thinks that Suboxone is somehow better, it's just the government's way of keeping you addicted.
We did it to ourselves, so you got to go through the backside of it, right?
It goes back to that statement: if you're gonna play, you're gonna pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if either of you had your choice, whether kick, heroin, or Suboxone,
It was actually, it did help. Suboxone did help because when I was taking it, it took away that struggle during the day because it was just convenient, and you take it and, you don't have to go through some shady guy, with a trench coat and sunglasses.
them pharmacists are pretty shady.
Yeah, it turns out they are. Yeah, it turns out that they, are in it for themselves, and it's just, oh man, they don't care about you.
Yeah, that's a tough road to be on. Mentally, my worst mental relapse, I would say, was I was active for about 4 months straight on heroin, so I was obviously physically addicted. And we had this natural disaster at home back in Colorado. We had this big flood, and this little mountain town that I lived in up in Estes Park it had one road in and one road out, and the flood took out the access basically. So we were landlocked, and in order for me to pick up my heroin, I had to drive 80 miles into Denver, and there's no roads to get there. So I could either get on my quad, run into the city, make an 80-mile run to score some stuff.
On a quad?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely,
Yeah, you have to do what you have to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're going to
exactly.
figure it
to.
out.
Yeah. So
know
it's
what I
like,
do.
okay, so I know that this guy has, there's a local tire shop that I went to, and I know that he has a razor. So I'm like, I'll go talk to him and see about, if I can get close, and I could call my guy, and he could maybe meet me halfway.
Yeah.
And so I show up there, and I'm just like,
I'm
I'm sick. Like, it's coming on. I hadn't used in like a day and a half. So it was
awful,
well coming on. And I was telling him why I needed his razor. And he's like, well, I got some stuff that'll at least get you through, but you're not going to take my razor. I was like, all right, what do you got? You know? And so he sold me a bag of meth. And I was like, okay, it's something. Mm-hmm. It's something.
Yeah.
So started going down the meth road, and not by choice. I was landlocked, okay? Don't judge me. Oh. And then he ran out of meth because we couldn't get any in, and he had a kilogram of cocaine. And this was a Mexican gentleman that brought it up about 3 months before. He was $500 he paid for that down in Mexico City and got it in. So he was selling.
That's like a brick.
Oh, yeah. It was the real deal. It was the real deal. And so I started getting chunks of that, you know. So I'd go hit up the ATM, and then I'd go to him first thing in the morning. And I rode that upper route, as in cocaine and meth. I kind of used that through my heroin detox.
Yeah.
And it worked. It worked. So about a month deep into the white powder game, shadow people start showing up. So the mental breakdown has started.
No, you're not getting much sleep. You're up all the time.
Like no sleep.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And at the time, I'm owning and operating an excavation company. And with the flood that had happened, the phone is just blowing off the hook. In the first 9 hours, we had 436 phone calls to come fix my driveway, come pull my car out of the ditch. Half my house is washed away. So, like, everything was so chaotic. And then I'm spiking it with uppers now. And it was like, this is pretty cool. This is going to work, you know? Because heroin, it's a downer, you know? You can run about 12 hours strong, and then you do your nightly shot, and then you put yourself to bed, and you're good to go. And then wake up and do it all again. And but with the uppers, it's like, oh, man, I don't need a couple hours of sleep. Like, this is phenomenal. You know, with all the phone calls, all the work, all the money we're making. Like, this is it. So about a month deep in the upper game, shadow people start showing up. You guys ever experienced shadow people?
Oh yeah, I'll talk to you about my little story about
that
after I get done with this.
So shadow people start showing up, and I'm start getting pretty scared, and so I start packing my AR with me everywhere I go, and I can't understand why they don't. Maybe I just don't want to believe that they don't show up when I'm not zooted to the roof, you know? Like, if I'm kind of high, they're not around. You know, it's just like,
they know, like they,
like they're just that so close, smart, you know?
Oh, man.
And it was just a downhill from there to where I thought they were chasing me, hanging off my tailgate. It was bad. Like, I would literally... This may sound crazy, but I would drive myself to the police station so that I could drive in front of the cameras outside the police station so that they could get real footage of this, because I'd gotten pulled over a couple times.
Dude, we all do stupid stuff like that. I called the cops on myself.
Yeah?
What a dungus.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I broke my own back window. And I called the cops saying that my ex did it or something like that. But I mean, if you're on meth, you'll take down your ceiling fan, you'll search wires, you'll search holes in your walls, like anything that you can do, because you think you're smarter and you're outsmarting whoever it is that's after you.
Yeah.
But you're always thinking you're one step ahead of the game, but that thinking is just all false reality.
It's just scary. Psychosis or mania from uppers, right? Like, that's where it usually happens. I had the same problem, but with Xanax. Like, when how you were supplementing meth with the heroin, when I couldn't get opiates, the one thing that would calm me down was Xanax. I actually had a doctor prescribing me like a bunch of them.
Sure.
And when I was taking them, it would make me get through the time until I could get more heroin or whatever I was going for. But the Xanax ended up taking over. Like, it ended up, like, I talked to a nurse and she's like, yeah, that's the worst drug that there is. And I'm like, how? Like, my doctor gave me this. I know what I'm doing. And then I got it, and I would take it, and I'd take more. Then I started snorting the stuff, and then I came off of it one time. and I was up for 4 days. Like I couldn't sleep, and I was living at my girlfriend's house, and her mom lived there, and I needed to go to sleep because I was sitting there, and I remember waking up in the morning, and I thought like a TV was on, like somebody had like a TV on somewhere, and like I was like, man, did you hear that? When my girlfriend woke up, I'm like, that was so loud. Whoever the neighbor was that had it on, she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I couldn't sleep that next night. And then I remember waking up in the middle of the night, hearing my parents downstairs like setting up for Christmas or something, and like talking about me and all these different things. And then all of a sudden when I kind of came to, I was like, wait a minute, like my parents don't live here. Like, what's going on? And then so I started checking all my clothes to see if there was like little speakers or microphones in the tags. And I was hearing these voices over and over and over again. I'm like, it was my little fucking, my cousins came over and they visited from like out of town. I'm like, those little like shits, they put this in my clothes. I know they're messing with me because I was hearing their voices. And then all of a sudden I woke my girlfriend up. I'm like, do you hear this? Do you hear this? She's like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, you have to fucking hear this.
There's no way you can.
There's no way you do not hear this. That's how convinced you are when you're in that psychosis. And then I remember going, my brain telling me I am going to die if I do not take more Xanax or heroin. Like it becomes to the point where your brain will trick you into anything it can do to make you relapse again, to make you actually like, you know, give into it. You go through the physical, but then that mental part is what really puts the nail in the coffin. So I ended up taking some more Xanax that day. And I don't remember the next 24 hours of what happened, but this is what I was told. I went downstairs and I started talking to myself, talking to people on the phone that weren't there, started cooking with pots and pans on the stove, and my girlfriend's mom came out and was like, Kyle, what are you doing? And then she called my mom. She was like, Kyle's cooking. There's no food on the stove. He's calling people. There's no one there. No. I don't know what he's talking about. And I was like breaking drawers to think that stuff was in these drawers.
Yep.
And I was a guest. They were so nice to have me stay at their house while I was in like that time of trying to get myself back together. So I ended up going to the mental, you know, the psych ward.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to fight the security guard. I was talking about all these different things that were going on, and none of it was real. None of it was happening. I don't remember any of it, but they had to actually give me a shot in my leg and tie me to the bed. And when I woke up, I was like, where the hell am I? And I was sitting there in the psych ward looking around like, what time is it? And I remember taking it around 2 p.m. and it was like 4 p.m. the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And
you've been to a psych ward?
Several. Yeah. Once the shadow people like exactly what Kyle's saying. Like I start seeing stuff, I start hearing stuff, and several. I holed up in this crawl space for this sewer line we were replacing for this gal. She was in Texas and she gave me her house key, and I ended up basically locking myself in this crawl space because I thought that they were after me in a way, because the crazy thing is I didn't even know what they were going to do if they got me.
It's like almost like a game you're in to me, because it's like when I stopped using, I was like, was this real? And it's like I almost like went back into the drug to try to see, like, disprove it, like he was saying or whatever. Yeah. You always do that, and it sucks, man. It's like, it's the insanity of just getting back into it and diving right back into it.
I don't know. My worst psych ward experience was I called the cops on myself and said, okay, they're hanging off my tailgate, so meet me at this intersection. So this was a town that I grew up in. There's about 5,000 people there, so you knew about everyone. And a couple of the cops that worked there I went to school with. So, hey, John, like, meet me at this intersection because they're hanging off my tailgate. And I hear him tell his partner, like, oh, that's Earl again. Let's go meet him, you know. And
let's go.
So we get there, and they pull me out of the truck, and I was like, did you see him? Did you see him? They're like, see who? I was like, man, how do they know every time? They must have jumped right off as soon as I pulled in here.
Or then you think that those people you asked are in on it too, because
maybe,
they're not admitting it.
They work for the government. Maybe they're in on it, right?
Yeah.
You know, all kinds of theories that go on. And so they took me out of my truck, and I was like, check the inside, like go ahead. And in my center console is where I would just kind of do my thing. And it looked like a blizzard went off in my truck. And he like looks at it, and he sticks his head out, and he looks at me and looks at his partner. And I'm just sitting there kind of like starting to sober up a little bit as it's like this is getting real again. And he lifts up my back mat and he starts counting out $100 bills, and there was $6,200 under my back floor mat, and it's like my stash, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, "What's all this for?" And I was like, "Oh, times are tough. Like, you can't trust banks. Like, give him some spiel that he's like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever." And he's like, "Well, do you want us to give you a DUI now, or how do you want to handle it?" And I'm like, "All right, here's how this should go, sir.
We'll take my DUI later.
If you just follow me home
Oh my gosh.
and walk around my house with me, because there's a foot of snow on the ground, and I will prove to you that the shadow people are after me, then we can talk, and then you'll know that I'm not crazy." And he's like, "We can't do that. You can't let you drive, And so his partner drove my truck to my house. I rode with him, and we walk around the house, and we can't. The only foot tracks that we can find are flip-flop tracks. And I'm wearing flip-flops
in the snow.
Of course.
Yeah.
A bro tee and flip-flops, We're talking December, up at 9,000 elevation. So it's like, and I'm still just sweating like insane. And so they're like, "No one's here." I was like, "Well, will I get in trouble? The house is locked." I locked myself out. And I says, "Well, if I can just get in my house, I promise I won't go anywhere. I won't bother you." And he shines his flashlight in, and he can see my gun safe right through the thing. And he's like, "Is there any guns in there?" "I lost the key." Natural addict response.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so they cuffed me on the spot, and they're like, "We're gonna take you down to the psych ward to sober up." And so that was like my worst psych ward experience, my worst mental relapse, I guess you could say. But it was the kind of thing where you go in the psych ward for like 3 or 4 days, you sober up, and you get some nourishment in you, and they cut you loose. And if you can find a ride home to your truck to go back to work to start doing it all over again, game on.
So what brought you all the way to the worst of, like, you went into recovery?
The worst of the worst, I'd say, financially led me to the worst. At when it was all totaled up, I was sitting at my desk in my office, and we had a real big window over here on the right side, and I would always run all my cash through the business, and my wife had no part of that. And whenever I needed drugs, I would just use the business account. And I look over, and I can see our mailbox, and I see my wife walking out to the mailbox, and boom, addict kicks in right away, right now. Like, it's like the third, like my bank statement is sitting in that mailbox. If she sees that, I'm done.
Oh, I hate that feeling. I remember that. Like, those close quarter Mission Impossible times where you're like, "Oh, it's on. Like, it's do or die right now. And if I don't get this, like, I'm gonna die."
It's done. And at the same time, I've got this little camera that keeps coming around the corner in the back door, like, checking me out. The shadow people are doing my thing. So now I have to get around the shadow people to get to the mailbox. I mean, that's just this is my normal. This is what I was in. And so I can't go anywhere because the shadow people are on the back door. And she gets to the mailbox, and she's walking back down the driveway, and I see her open the statement, and she just looks straight up at me in my back window, or in my office window. And I'm like, I'm done. And she comes inside, and I'm just sitting there, and she's flipping through it. She's like, "Where's all this cash going?" I'm like, picking up extra help, this or that. She totaled it up. In the previous 7 months, I'd spent $12,000 a month out of the ATMs, which was all for drugs. Yeah. And this was a time during the flood, so it was like...
And you were able to hide it this well, like, from her?
She knew, but I kind of had her in a situation where I was a provider. I give her house, I give her food, I give her nice cars, I give her everything. But she was stuck. She was basically stuck to where she could kick me out for a week and I could sober up. She wanted the best for me. She loved me like to death, literally.
So do you have a lot of shame? Like you had a lot of shame behind this too.
For a long time, absolutely. Once I actually started getting mentally stable to understand the level that I had taken it to,
Yeah, of course.
and the position that I had put her in, so unfair.
Well, yeah, the shame is like coming down off the drug, and not like when you're on the drug. There's no shame. There's no
no.
guilt. Nothing. It's everything for that power.
I mean,
That's
it's
it,
there,
yeah.
but I can cover it up with your chemical easy
Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's harder to actually stay off the drug and suffer through it, and then to go out and get do what you have to do, shady stuff to get it. The guilt is a lot lighter than the pain and anguish you're gonna go through if you don't get that drug. So
Physically,
it just
absolutely.
like destroys everything in its path to get to that point. But this will lead into what I really want to talk about today, which was like when we are doing the steps, how do you forgive yourself? I know I'm still struggling with a lot of the things that I've gone through, and I've hurt people, and I'm out there trying to make amends and do what I can do. But the hardest thing I think as addicts is actually to have to like deal with yourself, like to actually like say to yourself like it's okay for what I did in the past and let go a lot of that and then move forward. Like how did you get through that, I guess?
The way that it get into that type of situation is obviously hard to get out because it takes years to get into that mental state of complete fuckets is what I'm gonna call it. So it takes time to get out of that. And you bring up the word forgiveness, and I've asked for forgiveness. I'm sure you guys are the same. Ask for forgiveness so much that really the weight of that word kind of doesn't mean a whole lot anymore.
Yeah, I'm sorry it can go so long. That's
I'm
it.
sorry I stole all your money. What do you want? I'm sorry. You ask for forgiveness so much that it really doesn't have any meaning anymore. So when we take that word forgiveness and we start to turn it around toward ourselves, as in, how was I able to forgive myself? I believe is a question you're asking.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't.
Yeah.
I personally cannot forgive myself. I have to rely on something other than myself to forgive me before I can even think about forgiving myself. I believe that the steps are in the order that they're in for a reason. Step 1, I showed up. I don't know why, but I showed up. Step 2, I came to. I started to get some mental clarity, right? Sobered up.
Yeah.
And step 3, I came to believe, right? I start to believe in something other than myself and accept that the decisions that I have personally made have put me in this world of negative consequence, right? So why would I start to believe or rely on myself when it comes to forgiveness of I can just forgive myself and move on? That's fantasy land. That's the world that I lived in.
Yeah.
Was fantasy. Yeah, sure, I forgive myself. Up here, great. But what does that really mean? When we get to step 3, I came to believe in something other than myself. Then the shift starts to happen to where I can actually start to believe it down here.
Yeah.
But in order to start believing that, I have to rewrite my belief system. I believe I'm a piece of shit because of the decisions I make.
Yeah.
That's who and what I am. Whether you like it or not,
Don't get down on yourself, man.
that's who that's who and what I am.
Me.
Yeah, you look
No,
like you're down.
no,
on
I
yourself.
know how that goes. Like I know how it feels to just hate yourself so much, and have that hate grow more and more if your alcoholism or addiction isn't treated after you get sober. That's what breaks us and like sends us back to relapse, is just sitting there with ourself and having all of that shame and guilt, and then knowing that you can just wipe that all away if you just go grab some drugs and pick up. But
Well, you're already a piece of shit. Go out and use. You're hopeless. You're fucking whatever. I am
once
the
you
way I
own
am.
that, once you own that title, like there's no stopping how bad it's gonna get. Like,
And then that's what I would call an emotional rock bottom. An emotional rock bottom to where I don't care if I live or die. I know there's way too much dope in this rig, but I don't care. If I wake up from it, awesome. Another good high under the belt. If I don't wake up, great. I'm doing this world a favor by canceling myself out of it. Who am I to make that type of decision? I'm nobody. I'm a nobody to be able to make that type of decision. As in, I haven't earned the right to make that kind of decision. I don't make the sun come up. I don't make the moon go down, right? I don't make this heart beat. I don't make my lungs absorb the oxygen out of the air.
Yeah.
So who am I to make that decision for my life? I'm not. So to get to that emotional rock bottom of I don't care if I wake up or not is probably the spot that got me into start realizing how bad it really was.
Did you go through a rehab, like on your last stint that you had, or like what happened, or did you just kind of quit cold turkey? Like, how did it work out for you?
I ended up in Prescott. I kind of came out of a fog on an airplane. I was supposed to be flying to Key West for a 13-day Christmas vacation, and my wife had other plans that she was going to buy me a ticket down to Prescott, Arizona instead. And
How nice.
She sabotaged you.
Oh, it was smooth too, you know. And I came to on the airplane like, what's going on, you know? She's like, well, you're going to Prescott for long-term treatment. At this point, my resume, I had half a dozen 30 days under my belt. Plenty of psych wards, plenty of detoxes, IOPs, the whole nine. I do whatever you need me to do at the time so that I can prove to you that I am a useful member of society until I really don't want to be.
Yeah.
You know, I can do that. I can show up for anybody, anywhere. But to actually have it some weight was this long-term treatment is like, okay, I've done a number of 30 days. I'll do a 45-day treatment. I will
Nice.
agree
I'm
to
gonna
it.
15
That's a
more
gentleman's.
days. Look
That's
at
a
me.
gentleman's trade, right
It
there.
is
45
long-term
days.
treatment.
Yeah.
Well, shit you not. 8 months later, I graduated from a program here in Prescott.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was.
They made some money off of you.
They did. They checked out.
But was it needed?
Was it needed? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You know, a 30-day treatment. We all have our opinions, and from my experience, a 30-day treatment program is enough to get physically well, to put on some weight. But a person needs really years to get emotionally, spiritually, and physically well enough to be that useful member of society that we really want to be. I believe that's why college is 4 years long and not 4 months long, because it takes that long to learn enough to earn that degree. Maybe treatment should be 4 years long. I don't know. Maybe it should be a lifelong. I don't know. Are we ever really cured from this disease?
No.
No, because you always know that it's available. Like, it's always going to be there. If everything goes wrong, if all else fails, there's still some light at the end of the tunnel.
So-
I can go pick up at any time, and then you just start to give that up, though, but that is a scary factor for us. We want to say, when you get out of treatment, that I'm cured, guys. Look, everyone. Look at me. 90 days, I did it.
I did
Oh, goodness. Aren't you proud? But it just comes down to, like, you know, I think right at that 90-day point is, like, right when you decide, like, oh, this is a choice. Like, I feel good enough, okay. I mean, like, okay enough inside to where I physically don't need it. Mentally, it's still grabbing you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're in a
But-
bubble, and then
yeah.
the second you get out of that bubble, you graduate, and then you have to go out and face everything that you had.
Yeah.
You have to go out there and be like every single thing that you did wrong. You have to go to the court cases, that kind of stuff. And
So
just
your
handle the
problems
shit.
didn't just disappear the day
No.
you graduated treatment?
And then dealing with those with the emotion, like behind that, and actually
Mine did.
having to feel those emotions and
My
stuff like
problems
that.
disappeared.
Oh,
You feel like you're going to be like, you're getting slammed down. It almost makes you want to trick yourself to go out and just use the drug again.
Yeah, oh yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah, that was my experience for sure. You know, I got out and this big old pat on the back, you know.
Yeah.
You
And then
made
you're like,
it.
what next? So, well, like, what did you
Now
do
what?
next? Like, once you finished up your 8 month, you ended up staying out here, obviously.
Yeah, staying out here, and I was gracious enough to experience some surrender when I was in treatment. Surrender to the simple fact that I couldn't do it. You know, I couldn't do it on my own.
No.
And I needed guys in my life like you. I needed a God in my life that was way bigger than me, and I needed a support system that I could be completely honest with. And with that recipe, it actually gave me a chance. Sold the excavation company in Colorado, sold my house. my wife and 2 kids made the decision to move down here with me. I didn't make them do any of that. We talked about it like responsible adults do. And I didn't make my children make any decisions they didn't want to because of my disease. Yeah. They made the decision on their own that let's move to Prescott because the weather is awesome.
Yeah.
You know, is that not how God works, though?
And I looked at my life like, why couldn't it, you know, some people might look at it this way of like your wife, she stuck around.
Yeah.
Like to be thankful for that, like is awesome. You know, I lost my daughter and I kind of look at it like, man, why didn't that happen like in my situation? You know, I get better or whatever. Sure. But I can't look at it that way. You know, I try not to. And it's just, you're very thankful to be in your situation, and that's awesome. Like that all turned out that way.
Oh yeah.
But you know.
But see, the cool thing is
we don't have control over this stuff, and that's a thing that we have to really realize. On top of that, even though she did come, you still have other problems. Like problems do not go away ever. It's just what we make of those problems and what we think of what we control around us. We can't control everything. We can't even, you can't control how she acts to this day still. No. You just have to go with it, and that's all you can do.
It is, and that word gratitude that you're bringing up, like I was so incredibly grateful that I had a sponsor that would walk me through this process of not making decisions for them anymore. They're grown. My wife's a grown adult. She can make her own decisions. All I can do is propose a plan, and she can accept it or move on. A negative hit that my marriage had taken because of my drug addiction was I really didn't have a decision anymore in it. I was the culprit. I was the problem.
Oh yeah.
It was I in all aspects, you know, and all I could do is just basically show up. With the surrender and a God in my life and be like, this is who I am. This is my identity as a follower of Christ. And these are the choices that I can commit to you to making, which is staying spiritually healthy and focusing on gratitudes and not dwelling on the past, and offer a support system that she really needed. That when we got married, I did not follow through with my vows and say that till death do us part, because my mistress was straight up heroin.
I had the same issue with that. I mean, like I've always been loyal and faithful, and in my relationship I've been in for the last 7 years, but she definitely considered my drug usage to be like cheating because of how I was so dedicated to that and neglected her. And I know how it goes, and when you're in that situation, when you finally like get to where you're clean and you want to do the right thing and you have no choice in the matter, how you have to earn that back. If you say it's going to take like a year or so, that just seems like it's forever away.
It is.
But if you do what you were talking about with one day at a time, it collectively adds up. It's like putting a brick in a wall every single day until you accomplish that, and where you get it to where you want it to. So you have to keep your head up, move forward, and know that you cannot change the past. Like everything that you did, somehow God is playing into all this, and you need to trust the process that He's actually working through you to help someone or to do some good somewhere. Even though it was painful and you don't want to go through what you went through ever again, you went through that to get that experience and that knowledge and to help others. And that's all we're trying to do right here is with the podcast. And I know that, you know, you're an inspiration to all of us here, that you're actually able to do what you're able to do when you have time for everyone and you're always putting yourself out there. And that's what addicts in recovery need to be doing right now, is putting themselves out there and doing stuff they wouldn't regularly do, but God putting it on your heart like, yeah, I need to help. And that's where you get fulfillment from. That empty void that you're walking around with, filling it with drugs, that's it feels better than drugs when you're in God's will and you know that you're helping and you're just acting out, you know, through Him versus in your own will and taking control back. I mean, we never really have control, but yeah,
meeting you at Elements like really, you know, was a turning point for me, and just seeing like where you're at today. I look up to you a lot because I've been going to Bible studies with you for a while now, and just hearing what you told me, like it was probably like 3 weeks ago, of like, why didn't I give that guy a ride? You know, like I was in that spot once, and you get to a point where you feel like people are using you. But we used people our whole lives.
Yes.
And whether they're using us or not, we have to help the next person as much as we can. I mean, there always has to be a breaking point, but we had our chance, and now it's our chance to help somebody. Because if we don't help that person, what happens? They're not going to get help. They're just going to die.
They are.
Nobody will help them.
I'm a huge perspective guy, as you guys know. And one thing that today that all three of us share is we don't have to do anything for anybody today. You hear that? We don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
We get to. I mean, if you look at the perspective of we get to sit here and talk about something as cool as recovery with God being the center in a country where we're free to do it, we get to do that today. How many spots in the world where they don't get to do this? You know what I mean? So if we look at it as through the eyes of we get to be a part of someone else's recovery, then we start to receive the fulfillment that we're talking about, that yeah, a drug used to fill that void in our soul. But today, stepping out in faith because of what we experienced through a relationship with God, is we get to be of service to others. You know, how many hundreds of people have come alongside us in our worst of our worst? They didn't have to do that. They didn't have to, but they made the choice because they got to.
So what got you to the position like where you're at today with running Elements,
Mm-hmm.
the Bible studies that you're with, like kind of like how did you follow those footsteps to get where you're at?
Well, basically, I was at a point to where I had tried to get physically better. I tried to get emotionally well or better, and I had tried to get mentally better. I tried to put all three of those in front of my spiritual care. And every time that I did that, I would relapse. I mean, this was a pattern that I could look over the past 15 years. This last go around, I was encouraged by my sponsor to do something different to get spiritually well first.
Yeah.
And then the physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I've noticed that as I've gotten spiritually well, or my spiritual tank is being filled up, I find it that life is worth living. Just to have that spirituality to pass on to the next guy who just might need it at a meeting like Elements or at a Bible study like Wednesday nights, that's an opportunity right there that I get to do. The biggest thing the biggest high that I experience these days is seeing the light bulb turn on when someone actually can relate with what I'm talking about through all the shit and the mud and the mire, right? But then I start to talk about the positive spiritual principles that we get to experience with each other. To see that light bulb turn on top of Kyle's head as we're working through step 3, it's the best high ever.
And does that turn on and off? Like, I mean, it's not always on and the brightest it can be, like the fullest it can be. Like, what do you do to like maintain that? Or if you're feeling like spiritually low that day, like what do you do to kind of keep that up?
Well, that stems all the way back to what we were talking about of this forgiveness of self. That's a red flag right there, that when I feel like my faith tank is running empty, or I don't want to show up for other people when the opportunity presents itself, I have to look straight back at myself, just like I would when I was trying to score dope. No one's going to do it for me. I got to do it for myself. Well, if I start looking at myself and I start to realize that my spiritual tank is starting to run on empty, then I start stopping, or I start finding it difficult to forgive myself for running that yellow light, or for not answering that phone call, or this or that. And it's this spiritual check that God has gifted us all with, that today I have the ears to hear and the eyes to see that I'm not doing as good as I can, and it's starting to show up in other areas of my life.
So I've been talking on the podcast here a lot about Elements, a big meeting like where everyone meets at, about 200 people every week. We definitely promote that meeting for any newcomers that are coming into the program, just to see what it's like to actually like have fun in recovery. You run that whole thing. What's it like, and what's it all about?
Well, basically, the mission behind it is to present this encounter of God to someone that's either had a negative spiritual experience or a negative religious experience. I'll put it that way. So to bring fun into a 12-step meeting is harmless fun. Something that a lot of us don't experience and are using, that it's okay to be a 14-year-old kid again and have fun with a dorky game. Like, that's an okay thing to do. And to incorporate that into a 12-step meeting that carries such weight, that this is people's lives we're talking about, it sounds like it shouldn't mesh at all. But here's the thing that we've experienced in this meeting is it's a faith-based 12-step meeting. So in every conversation, we keep God at the center. If we can connect with each other at a spiritual level through having a little bit of fun and talking about a step that is life or death, if we can keep it at a light enough level to where it's attractive, I'm all in.
It's nice to break up those meetings, just to have a meeting that you can actually talk about the steps, and you're just open. You have speaker meetings, you have a little bit of fun.
We do.
And what else do you guys have? You talk on the steps, right?
Yep. So our main program night, it's either we start with a fun game and or a band. We like having music because we all like music, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what was the last 12-step meeting you were at that had a band?
I don't. I have any
Never?
idea. Yeah, never.
Never?
It's
Right?
so quiet and dead in there that it's almost like getting put in timeout sometimes. I'm not knocking it, but it's definitely a bright change is going to Elements.
It is.
And that's the scary thing about this too, is the first time I went to Elements, I just was like, I don't know if I really like this. But it was my will, like, of saying, like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
These people don't know me. That's me being self-centered towards myself, not opening up, and nobody can fix me.
Yes.
But the second I just kind of like let go and just be like, you know what, this is what it is. I am where I am, and I'm here for a reason.
Yep.
And once I did that, and it opened up just a little bit, and I started opening up to the people there at Elements, they're not going to hurt you, and they're more friendly, and they're more family than you probably ever had.
Yep.
Your family's not always going to be there, but every person around you is your family, if you really think about it.
It is. It's a new family that is centered around God. And we start out with that fun right out the gate. So it really sets this atmosphere of like, this is a pretty cool thing. Then we roll into a testimony where it starts to get a little bit more real, where, okay, I can relate with what this guy's talking about, and he's in the same meeting. And then we go into a teaching on a specific step for that night. So we hit all three things that us as drug addicts look for in the real world. We're always looking for a little bit of fun. Whether it was dangerous or not, it's still fun, right? We want to relate with people. That's where the testimony part is so powerful. And then the teaching part, we want to be able to take something from a meeting. So we fully encompass all these three things together while keeping God at the center. It's an amazing recipe that has changed hundreds of lives. I mean, our meeting, we're averaging 196 people per meeting right now, which is unheard of. People actually want to come back to this meeting. If I have to choose, in my experience, if I have to choose where a meeting that I'm forced to or a meeting that I have an option to go to, I'm going to go to the one that I can relate the most with. And that's a meet that has been Elements for me.
Getting out and actually speaking to people and being real is something that we didn't do for so long, that when you're just thrown into an environment like that, it's hard to do. But life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and the more we've pushed ourselves to be uncomfortable, the more we've grown and the more we're getting out of this recovery. And Earl is constantly doing Bible study, meetings, teaching, helping all the time, and he's made tremendous progress. And I think that's what I could recommend for everyone out there, is just to put yourself out there and watch how much you start to grow, because the more you stay in that little comfortable bubble where you feel like you can control everything around you and everything is going the way that you're hoping, it's going to stop you from becoming who you're supposed to be or what God wants you to be.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be out there, making a difference.
Well, here's the thing. God created each and every one of us in his image, right? Safe to say. That's what it says in the Word. And our behaviors start to become our image. And in men like you and me, our behaviors are to lie, steal, and cheat so that we can get high and escape, right? The furthest from what we were originally created to be, which is not being able to forgive ourselves. So would you say that since you guys, both of you, have been guests to this Bible study and this Elements meeting, is it safe to say that what you've seen, what you've learned, what you've picked up at those meetings, that it's directing you into a spot where it is possible to start to forgive yourself because of who you are, not because of what you've done?
I believe that's correct because I couldn't forgive myself for anything.
Right.
It was just me stuck in my own will, but to be with, and not just to say like-minded people, but we all came from the same area, and just coming together and hearing everybody's problems. Everybody is getting vulnerable, and just being real. We were taught we couldn't do that. I was in the military. I can't. You can't say anything like that. Oh, I feel sad. You can't say that shit.
Right.
You go into this Bible study, there's no, everything's on the table. You can say whatever you want, and you relate more than you think to each other than you
There's
than
someone
you know.
that's
And
gonna
once you
relate to
feel
there.
once you feel that man, I feel the same way he does, man. It brings on that relief that you're not the only one.
Right.
You're being selfish to yourself.
In a weird
Thinking,
way.
oh, I only feel this way. I only me.
Yep.
Guess what? If you get vulnerable, you're gonna feel all those feelings through somebody else, and you're gonna be like, man,
It is.
the relief of it's not just me, man.
Yep. And then before you know it, these relationships start to where I can come to you with something and get extremely vulnerable and receive no judgment, feel completely safe. I mean, that's foreign land. That's foreign. But that's exactly what happens every Wednesday night and every Thursday night, because we're keeping God at the center and we're putting our trust and faith in something greater than ourselves.
People say that, it's God forgives you for what you've done. You've apologize and seek forgiveness with Him, and it's why can't we forgive ourselves then for what we've done? It still might hurt a little bit, but that when you have that spiritual sort of awakening to knowing that there's something greater than yourself that you are now under and you're following.
If we get past all that and we rely on another source to hand that over to, that takes it off of us. That's the feeling that you can get.
And just knowing that,
because we can never forgive ourselves. You just can't. For all the shit you did, it's it's just me taking control over and over again, and I'm trying to fix something that I can't fix. Hand it over.
Pissing in the wind.
Yeah. So.
Well, all right, guys, we're gonna wrap this up. I'd like to thank Earl personally. Thank you, sir, for coming on the podcast. Being our first guest on here. It was really important to have you on here. People needed to hear what you had to say because you've been so inspirational to John and I, to where we're able to get up here and talk freely and do this. It's been awesome having you here, Earl. Everyone, check out Elements on Thursdays at the Heights Church here in Prescott at 7 p.m. We'll be there. And hashtag Redtail CrossFit. Email us at recovhubpodcast@gmail.com. That's RECOV podcast@gmail.com. We'll get you the info on all this, and we'll get you connected and get you some help. So
Look forward to seeing and hearing from each and every one of you out there. In closing, real quick, the hardest thing for men and women to do is to actually ask for help. It's the hardest thing to do, but it's the smartest thing that you could do for yourself is actually ask for some help. And here's some young men here that are willing to help. So,
all right, guys.
Cool. Thanks.
To infinity and beyond.